So welcome everyone. This is the 5th of our sessions. It's just hard to keep count. So this is our field days, presbytery field days, connect, grow and serve, and we've had a really rich feast so far, and tonight I think will be no exception. So welcome to Heather Woodman, who's a lay preacher, a member of our congregation, secretary of Colbinabbin as well.
That's no claim to fame because it's very small.
As well as a primary school teacher and a mother of 2 young children.
Yes.
And Heather's going to share what it is, I suppose, about living simply and how they've got a really extensive garden and a long history in it. So, but I'll let her talk about that. So I'll stop my share and I'll pass over to Heather.
Now, do I have to share screen?
When you're ready. Just
yeah. So if I just click on share screen and
you've got to choose PowerPoint show.
Yes. So the one on the very left here.
Should say show.
Yeah.
That's it.
I come with a warning, folks. I might be a teacher, but my ICT skills are very limited, and nothing like the whole COVID last year to take us to a new level in those. But no one equates to Brian when it comes to ICT. There's no doubt about that. So I have to say from the outset that I feel quite inadequate leading this. And when Brian asked me, I was like, oh, help. What am I going to do? So I spoke to the kids and my husband and we said, oh, yes, well, we'll do a little video for Brian. And I handed it to him a few days ago and he said, well, that's all well and nice, Heather, but you've got to speak to it. Oh, okay. So we've ended up just breaking a video that I had prepared for you into 3 parts around the connect, grow and serve theme. And really the video is just sharing with you what happens in our family life, typically of a weekend when the 4 of us are home. And so I'll speak to it, we'll watch some of the videos and we'll break it up with discussions involving all of you as well. And I do truly hope that, you do get something out of tonight, and thank you for having me.
So we're going to do 2 things here. I'll disconnect my audio and you can say join audio, and then I've got to say share computer audio. So just let me disconnect my audio. Beautiful. And then the other thing we want to do in our sharing here, where's our menu? We need to, there we are, that's the one. Share computer sound.
Won't you just stay here by my side?
Okay, now we've optimised that, that's wrong.
So to begin with, I'm not sure, but most of you, I would assume, know where Colbinabbin is and have heard of Colbinabbin. It's a very, very small town. When you're coming from Shepparton to Bendigo, if you go through Rushworth, you come through this humble little place called Colbinabbin. So it's about an hour from Bendigo, an hour from Shepparton, and 45 minutes north is Echuca. So that gives you a bit of a picture where we are. But to probably paint that picture in more detail, for a very small community, we do have a lot of things in our community. We have a school and kindergarten. We have a rural supplies CRT store. There's a local pub and a general store, which has just become a community store in recent months, which is fantastic for the town. There's a hall, your CFA, and of course a lot of sporting groups. We all have a swimming pool, which we had a fight a few years ago with our council to try and retain, and we were lucky enough to succeed that.
And which Heather led.
Yeah, that was part of it, co-leading that initiative. And more recently too, our little claim to fame here in Colbinabbin is the silos, which have been painted, 6 lovely silos. And if you haven't been out this way, they are well worth a day trip to come over and have a look at. But probably significantly for us joined here tonight is the fact that there are 3 churches here in Colbinabbin. There's a Catholic one out of town and an Anglican one probably a kilometre up on the hill, and our little Uniting Church here in town. But the three churches work beautifully together, and we have a strong ecumenical spirit. And once the fifth Sunday, we do try and get together and share a service together, which is a great time of fellowship. And in amongst all of those things, the sign will tell you there's 116 people in Colbinabbin, but there is a few more than that by the time you count these out-of-town people. So that's a bit about our small community. Obviously, a small town like this inevitably makes us connected to many people in many ways. And for me and the children and my husband, we've got some very strong connections in the town because my parents are here and they do a lot of babysitting for us. My dad, who's 82, was actually born and bred here, so all he knows is Colbinabbin. And obviously, I've had Dad's brothers in the past, but they've now died. But my own brother is still here with his wife, and so I have nieces and nephews. So my children have a strong sense of grandparents, aunt, uncle, and cousins living close by. And our children spend a lot of time after school with their grandparents, and much gardening takes place. They raise seeds in the greenhouse. They care for the garden, and they do a lot of cooking with my mother. So those things are very significant for us. At the heart of everything that we kind of do as a family is this Christian faith we have, and core to this is the belief that God created the world and that we're stewards of the earth. And so Scott and I see it as our responsibility to respect God's creation and tread lightly as we live. And that's the kind of message that we try to instill to our children in the things that we do with them in the garden. Now, there should have been video 1 in there, Brian.
Just press the down arrow.
Yep, so, oh yes, so here it is. So just this short video is only 6 minutes long, but it'll give an introduction to us and some of the things that we do. Okay.
Hi, we're the Woodman family. I'm Heather, this is
Harry
and
Ray.
and Scott's videoing. We're not perfect, clearly. We're just a young Christian family who live simply. We work for the environment, caring for it where we can in our home environment. We try and look after the earth. One thing that's really important to us is growing our own food and then taking it into the kitchen where we turn it into everyday meals. What we're wanting to do today is to share with you some of the things that we do, some of the things we grow, some of the things we recycle, and we hope that a little bit of what we do might be useful to you. Thanks. The thing we like to do is come and feed the chooks and collect eggs. Let's go, Harry. Come on in, throw them some fresh greens. That's the boy. How many eggs, Dom? 7 eggs. Well, I'll hold the container out.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
7. Good boy. Okay, no more. When we've got our fresh eggs, we like to go and get some chives and parsley so we can make it into a frittata.
Thank you, Chuggies.
Thank you, Jooks.
And also, after being in the chook pen, we wipe our shoes.
Okay, we need to get some lettuce.
Okay.
Are you going to pick some lettuce? Now you need to water the seedlings you're growing.
and fill it up from over there.
Are we right now?
Harry, you can water. You can both water your seedlings. So here you've got some silver beet, some carrot, some spinach, and a few different flowers, some pansies and some poppies.
Pansies, dianthus, and poppies.
And these are all seedlings that you've done with your grandparents.
Oh. Careful.
Oh.
Oh, don't get me wet.
Good job. Okay.
And now, a bit more lettuce. Hose, Mum. Look how big that egg is! Can. Some of these books don't like it. Another just a big one.
That's another big one. All right, you got 2 more eggs to crack.
I want to say if he's a double yolk.
Oh, I don't know if there's any double yolkers today. These look a bit too small.
This one might be a.
Yeah. That's me.
Where's the lettuce?
Oh, it's in the fridge. Did you keep
Do we
chopping?
need a big lettuce?
Right.
That shell was a bit strange. All right, there you go. There's the last one.
But look at the egg. That looks weird. The egg.
No, that's normal.
Are we putting more eggs than we usually do?
Not about the same. Good job. Great.
No double
Fantastic.
yolkers.
No double
And then
yolkers.
I'm going to wipe my hands.
All right, and then could you please start whisking? You do your whisk job, and I'll check in with Ruth. How are you going? That looks really nicely cut. Now we need to add yours, Ruth, to Harry's eggs.
It's a swell.
All right, Harry, would you please take your eggs over to Ruth, and we're going to put that all in hers, all in yours.
And now I can get mixing.
Yep.
She might have built a miss one. So I put this in him.
Yes, you know what to do. Pop that all in there.
Can I put some in the cheese?
Yeah, put it all in. Yeah, sometimes I scatter the cheese in there. It's all the same.
And I'll get this. Get that.
All right. Now we need. You're going to have a whisk now, Ruth, yourself.
Where's
Yeah, there.
Oh, Ruth, I stand on the stool.
Well, you can stand on it next time. You're already on it.
Mum, I need it now.
Here's the other stool.
That's Ruth's stool.
Okay, well, swap over. I didn't think it really mattered whose stool was whose
I
today.
don't need a stool even, but actually it's just. Oh, yum! Cheese.
That looks great, kids. Now we're going to pour it into the dish with our roast pumpkin.
I'll do half, then you do that.
Yeah, that's fair. Half and half. Give it all a shake around.
Yeah.
Cover everything.
Need to cover all the potatoes.
Pumpkin.
Whatever.
That's great. Going in the oven as is.
It's all eggy.
So at this point, I just thought it would be great to hear from some of you and think about some of the major influence. It could be people in your life or events that have helped you form a deep connection with the environment. So from the video, you could see growing our own plants, clearly for us, has been an important thing, but also I've mentioned the significance of grandparents for these children. But love to hear from some of you about the people or places that have helped you form connection with the environment and how your faith in God links in with that. I can't see. Is anyone out there?
Well, I grew up with vegetable gardens. We always had a vegetable garden, was self-sufficient in veggies, I suppose, as a kid. And along with that, learned all about insects and the good ones and the bad ones and that sort of thing. So, so more than just growing the veggies, you learned about the environment in which you were growing them. And yeah, I got quite a love of spiders out of all of that, because there's fascinating spiders. No, lots of little tiny flower spiders, as well as huntsmen and what have you. Although we did used to feed flies to huntsmen as children on a darning needle. Not afraid of them, man.
Thanks, Barbara. That was good. Yeah. Someone else like to share?
I guess growing up on a farm, we always had animals around us, and we grew a lot of our own vegetables then, and we had chooks, so we were fairly self-sufficient as kids. And then when I got married, my late husband was a very keen gardener, and he always grew all the vegetables we needed. And I continue to grow quite a few, and actually all of my children are keen gardeners too. One of them doesn't have much time for gardening because his job's very demanding, but he grows a few things. And I guess we've always looked at it as that God provided all these wonderful things. And at the moment I'm watching a little passion fruit vine. It's just a seedling, and it came up quite a long way from the trellis, but it just amazes me how it reaches out to the trellis, and its tiny little tendrils curl around the wires on the trellis and attach to it. But I just think it's just made so marvellously that it does that sort of thing.
Yeah. Thank you, Joy. That's a great reflection. Is there someone else that wants to share?
When I was at primary school, I can remember reading in one of the school readers about how the crow turned black. It was one of the Indigenous stories. So I thought of making up my own about how the daisy was made. And I envisaged it starting off as a broken egg. So from there, I've always been interested in the stories from creation and how much they have influenced my thinking. I also grew up on a farm, so you can get, you're always marvelling at the differences in the seasons and how wonderful creation is. I can also recall I was on a dairy farm, and the calves would be separated from their mothers very early, and you would hear the cow calling and the calf answering apart from one another. And I can remember consoling one of the cows when I was a kid, telling her that, you know, her calf was being looked after. So it's sort of having an empathy with nature, both the animals and the plants.
Yeah, that's great, Robin, and obviously something you've carried through well and truly into adult too. That empathy you've learned at such a young age has stayed with you all the way through. It's a important skill for all of us to have, empathy. Someone else want to share, particularly maybe how their faith in God links with the environment?
Well, I guess I've been fortunate in that I've lived in every state except Western Australia and Tasmania. So I've seen a vast difference in all these different parts of Australia. And I think it helped me to understand the vastness of God's creation and how important this was in my life.
Thanks, Dorothy. What about Joan? Joan, did you want to add anything to this?
Well, I was thinking about it with all you farm children. I was a townie till I was almost 13. And we lived, I suppose, a couple of miles from the beach. So we saw that part of the environment because we went down there pretty often. But both my parents were keen gardeners, although I don't remember Mum ever doing any in Melbourne. She had 3 of us to look after, and then a 4th one when we did actually go to Castlemaine. We waited for her to be born. But Dad was a very good gardener, and we weren't quite self-sufficient with our veggies and some fruit, but we did a whole lot. But then when we got to Castlemaine, we had a house on 2 blocks, and we also had some chooks, and we had the bush and all the gold mine unfilled in shafts, just a street behind our place. And we also, between us and the town, had one of the famous alluvial gold-bearing creeks. So I saw a different sort of creation. Besides the bush, there were all these other things. But it actually took me until I was teaching, and I went beyond Bendigo to Bort in my first year to realise that actually it's the Northern Plains where I belong and the big rivers. So I've made a point of staying up and down the Murray more or less ever since. So all of this varied parts of the country and also the scope, particularly the 180 degrees of whichever way you look, whether up or down, and all this variety of the creative world has been a very intense part of my faith. And we know that lots of people, lots of Christians are Jesus people and lots of others are spirit people, but I would call myself a God person, like a Trinitarian one, but it's largely because of the God, the creator, that I react in this way.
Thanks, Joan.
Heather, I grew up in a market gardening family just out of Melbourne, and we used to grow vegetables and sell them at the Melbourne market. So I have great appreciation for what it takes to feed people and to grow it up on a commercial status, starting right from early spring, all the different things that you provide to the Melbourne market for people. And we also grew up in a Christian family, so we understood that we worked with the land and it provided the food for the people, and this was part of God's land. But I think I've been drawn much closer to it since we started these things on in this particular week that we're looking together and thinking. One of my favourite verses has always been John 3:16 and 17, for God so loved the world. And when you stop there, that's one of the important bits I think we've missed out in some of our theology, and we've been reminded of that again, that we are in God's world, and we need to think about that as well as the other things.
Thanks, Kevin. it's a nice tie into what you've been learning earlier in the week. Some of what we've been talking about in this connect segment leads into the next one, connect and grow. So I have to confess, within our little family unit, I spend a lot of time in the kitchen trying to, cook some of the things, and my husband's the one that's the real grower. He's the one that will get out there with the kids and plant and reap and harvest and whatnot, and he's the one that gets things so they're in on time, and he's the one that then gets frustrated if he thinks he's missed his chance to plant whatever plant he wants to plant. But so the next little segment is more the connect and grow, where we're just going to show you a video of some of the different things we grow. And all you good farming people and gardening background people, it will echo sentiments with things that you have grown in your life, or you still grow. Some of you are still actively growing. So I'll move into the next video. Where would that be embedded, Brian?
It should be just come up as you go. There we go.
No, that's the one we just did. So maybe, Brian, I might have to go here, and then I'll go back to those slides, if that's okay. So I'll show you this video first, and then I'll go back to a few slides to point out a couple of things.
All right, we're going to plant some garlic. We're planting 2 different varieties of garlic, a big variety and a smaller variety. So we're going to plant them about 20 centimetres apart, and we're going to plant them about 7 or 8 centimetres deep. So you're going to push them down with the pointy end upwards, down into the soil. We're going to have 3 rows of 6 garlic in each row. So Ruth, you can start planting that row.
So, which is this the pointy end bit?
Yeah, Harry, you can plant that row. Just follow the first row that I've done.
Do you have to see under?
No, they're going to be deep.
So, like, here.
You might dig it down a bit more.
So, like that?
Yeah.
Oh, and that one. Oh, come on, this isn't squished.
Push it right down. These will take about 6 months before they're ready.
Okay, up there. So you cover them with soil on top.
Yeah.
Up the pointy end. Oh yeah, I'm going to play. Where is that one? That one needs to be. No. Where did the point? Oh yeah, and up. Did you play any of them?
Yeah.
No, you're just sideways. All right, we're nearly done.
I love the gloves.
Yes.
Garden beds are just recycled materials that we use. You don't need fancy garden beds for your plants. They don't care as long as you've got good soil and water and stuff for them. One of these baths came from our house when we did a renovation. Another one was basically here with the house, so we've repurposed them recently to grow various things in. So you saw us plant the garlic. We've got some cabbages in this front one here with the lawn clippings as mulch. It had carrots in it a couple months ago, and the other one had beans in it, and it's quite handy for your back to have something like this just up off the ground. It's a lot easier to get the weeds out. The next one, or the next two beds, there's an old rainwater tank that we had here that I cut up rather than just sending it to scrap metal or the tip. Thought we could get 10, 15 years maybe out of it as a raised garden bed, and they're really good because they've got a little bit of a protective lip around them for the seedlings from the wind. And this first one has cauliflower in it, and the other one's got potatoes, which we're going to harvest some of those because they're nearly finished. So we can harvest some of them now. I'll just pull some out to see what they're like. These are Sebago potatoes. I've got 450 that I should have. So these are a late crops. Probably won't get heaps of them, but
Potatoes. Oh, that's a giant one.
some of these are a bit affected by the sunlight. But
This is giant.
that's not bad.
Oh, here's some little ones. Little ones.
These mate.
No more potatoes.
Didn't come up as
You'll be
good.
having roast potato for tea, kids.
Nope. Oh, that's a baby one. Yeah. Oh. Whoa. Oh, Harry found another one. Here's a giant one.
Really need a fork.
Do you want a glove? Oh, wormy. Worm. Oh, look at these red potatoes.
Oh yes, there's a stray red.
Red and white. Yeah. Ooh. There's another potato. This is big. Yeah, but this
A few
one's
worms
bigger.
in here, so it's sort of quite good.
Wow.
So do you kids know what Dad does with some of those really small potatoes?
No.
And we don't cook them?
Replant them?
Yes, good boy, Harry. Dad keeps them aside and he replants them next time he wants a crop of potatoes.
I'm gonna
It's very
plant them.
economical. He calls them seed potatoes. They become the seeds for the next crop.
Oh, what are you doing?
What do you got there, love?
I love plants. Yeah. Laser gone crazy. Whoa. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
This is one of our fruit trees. We have a number of fruit trees that we get produce off during the year. Some years are better than others. We use a fruit fly net here because fruit fly is a bit of an issue in this area, and also just helps keep other bugs and pests off the environmentally friendly way, so you don't have to bother spraying. So that's why we use the net. And you get 5 or 6 years out of your nets or more if you look after them, so they're alright. This is a bit late. This is the last lot of fruit we've got this year. This is a golden delicious apple, and we're going to pick some of these to store in the fridge for a few weeks. And some of the ones that are a bit riper or a bit over mature, we will put into fowler's jars, which will show you some photos of those later on. And the fowler's jars extend your harvest and allow you to basically use the fruit out of season.
That's a big one, Danny. Ooh, I'll need a small one. The smallest one. I'll find you the small one. Oh, Oh, they're tiny ones over there. They're tiny ones. I'll need a tiny one. Oh, sorry. There's one over here. I have to put them in because you'll get another one. Bucket's nearly full, Dad.
All the apples are in the middle of the tree.
Oh, ah, bucket's full.
Just a couple of our citrus trees, Valencia orange, lemonade, Washington navel, and a mandarin with a lemonade and a couple of others. These are quite handy because, as you can see, you've got some of last year's crop that you can pick and use now, and you've got this year's crop. So, you know, fruit hang on these a long time compared to the other fruit trees, which makes them quite handy.
So I'll just go back. Can I go back, Brian? It's like, yep. Okay, so connect and grow. You would have picked up already family influences are really significant for us, and I think that's come out in the discussion earlier with some of you guys. Kevin, your family market gardeners handed down, and all of you people, your farm experiences and whatnot have stayed with you. Joy, I know you mentioned about your family still continuing on with the garden. So for Scott and I, both of us were raised with parents that really loved the garden, and it was a hobby for them, but B, also a way of them producing many seasons of the year food to feed families. So that was handed on to both Scott and I, and again, both our mothers were very active in cooking produce that was grown in the garden. And the picture there is actually some rhubarb. It's called Harry Woodman rhubarb because our little Harry was named after Scott's grandfather, and he had 3 or 4 different varieties of rhubarb, and one was a Harry Woodman rhubarb. So the next little thing in the grow segment here that I wanted to show you was not all the produce that comes out of our garden is perfect by any means, and it is an interesting conversation with the kids when you bring in the pumpkin and it's got these big slashes or whatnot in them, or the carrots got to be buggy or knobbly or whatever. Our kids are very used to just taking whatever produce we get from the garden, warts and all, and using that, and they know that it still tastes fine. And we have had plenty of a conversation, and this might echo sentiments with you as well, with your own families. It's a fine reminder that life is not smooth, it's not perfect, and we ourselves are far from perfection. And certainly with our children and some of the produce that we've brought in, sometimes the kids will joke and say it's a bit like mum, a bit bumpy or a bit warty or a bit old and had it. But they also, we have been able to speak to the kids about acceptance and difference through some of the produce we grow, and being able to link that back to life at school, and everyone's different. We're not all the same. And even as brother and sister, the 2 children are so different. But you know, we all have a special part to play and a special role to play. And even though we're not perfect, we still have a lot of good characteristics and qualities, and we can still be used, is probably a main point we've been able to teach our kids through the garden. And as an adult, I guess, a lot of things like that in the garden speak to me personally, and biblical stories of grace and starting again certainly have spoken to me in some of the failures we've had in the garden. We've planted something, obviously, and a bird's come down at the wrong time. You haven't covered things over and plucked it all out, and you sort of felt, you know, a bit of a sense of you failed there. And as I said, some produce we've grown hasn't been very good at all, and you think, oh, how could I possibly use that? But you can, and certainly sometimes it's got very disillusioned and said, oh, that summer was too hot, that plant didn't set, or summer was so hot it's burnt my apples, or whatever, and we've had to kind of just take stock and think, oh well, we need to be hopeful for the next season and trust that will be a better season. So yeah, as a family, we do find that the garden does remind us a lot of biblical concepts and biblical truths, and we've been able to turn to biblical things to help sort of keep us positive in our gardening endeavours. I think one thing that sort of strikes me, as I said, we're certainly not perfect and we only do the little simple things we do, but we do see the time in the garden with our children as a chance to be with them and help them connect and grow. And sometimes that's simply sitting on the lawn. The kids will sit there whilst we're busy watering a pot. Other times it will be pulling weeds from a flower pot, and it's probably a bit remiss of me tonight that I haven't put next to some of these nice garden beds our other flower pots on the front veranda where the weeds are coming out at a tumultuous rate. And yes, there's a nice parallel to the Bible there about where the good seed falls and the weeds that come up. But I guess the main thing is, whether you're doing the weeds from a pot or sitting on the lawn or watering, whatever, it is low cost activity with the children, but it's one that seems expensive at the time, because I know often they're thinking, oh, Harry, you got drive me crazy with 101 questions and I just want to go and do something else. But then you kind of stop and take a deep breath and think, later on in life, that's what you want the children to remember, the time that you have spent with them, when there are other things you could be doing, but just put that on hold and give the children the time that they deserve, and hopefully they will remember that in time to come. And I think I've already sort of spoken to that point, that there are many rich conversations about God, the world, creation, cracked flower pots that are in the garden, and just starting all over again when something's not right or it hasn't worked. All those things are opened up for us. And I was thinking, actually, Joan, when I sort of was putting this together, I was thinking of you, because I know you're so good to my children. You've come out here to church sometimes and brought seeds for them to go home and grow. You bring Harry bath salts, even Harry, a 6-year-old boy. Soap isn't good enough for him, but Joan McRae's homemade bath salts are what he likes best. And Joan, I know that you have so many children. You are so good to church friends and whatnot. And I was thinking there might be other people out there who spend a lot of time with young ones, whether it's your grandchildren or neighbours or close friends. And I'm sure you've had many, many memorable faith conversations with them, inspired by something in the garden. And so I thought I'd hand it back to this little group and see if you'd like to share something that, has been inspired in the garden in terms of a faith conversation. Who wants to kick us off?
Well, I started growing tomatoes in pots. The little cherry, the general varieties of cherry ones, when I had 12 years ago, when I first had the Congolese children coming, because they were able to just go and pick and eat. And I've still got a 3-year-old who's been picking her first, in the same main family, but she's been picking her first tomatoes in these last few weeks. And fortunately, I've still got some coming. So we've had those. And I should say to others, I have only great nieces and nephews. I have twin great nieces born the same day as Harry. Mm-hmm. So Harry's very special to me too. But because half of them are in Perth and the other half are in East Geelong, I never see them. So it's the ones who are local that can be part of my family, and such good fun. So and now we talk garden down at Lowry's household, because his father is a gardener for the city council, but he's got a brilliant gardener now. So we do our garden talk there more than at my place these days.
Doesn't matter where the conversation happens, it's still happening. Thanks, Joan.
Oh, I should say, their St Paul's Lutheran Church now has a community garden. And I said something to the kids about it, and they said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "You know that garden round near your soccer field in the church?" "Oh, that." I said, "Yes, your mother works there." "Ah, yes." But they do have one, a Lutheran African garden down there too.
I'd want to say our daughter who lives in Shepparton and our granddaughter who now lives in Shepparton too. Our granddaughter's garden, she lives in a new housing area and she's got the most wonderful garden, but she's also got our one and only grandchild, a 4-year-old, but she grows pumpkins in amongst the other shrubs and things in the front garden as well as out the back garden, and people come past and admire them, and she shares them. So little Oliver knows that you share the things in your garden too. You just don't keep them yourself, you share them with other people that mightn't have a garden.
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. That's lovely.
I don't see my grandchildren because none of them live near, but we often talk garden on the phone or in our letters. But during COVID, when we were locked down and we weren't able to have church, I kept in contact with all the people in our parish that didn't have internet connection. So every week I wrote them a little letter, and most of that was garden talk and photos of different things in the garden. And they still tell me how they appreciated it and they miss my garden talks now that we're not having to do that.
Yeah. Thanks, Joy. What about Jeanette? Are you still with us, Jeanette?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. I know you've got a lovely farm, so I bet you've got a great garden, and you've probably had conversations with some of your grandies already.
Well, our son-in-law is also a gardener, so the children, or the older grandson, comes and gardens, but he's more interested in the big garden, the 700 acres.
Yeah.
And the machines that drive over it. So
yeah, fair enough. Brian, what about you?
I just think, just listening, I think the thing that strikes me is it's such there's that non-materialist sort of part of this that is sort of in a world that's so consumerist and materialist. Gardens are such a wonderful, natural, evolving sort of thing. And also that idea that there's always these periods of abundance where you end up sharing with other people. I mean, I know you can preserve some, but even preserves end up getting given away or sold for jams and whatever. And it's a lovely counter to the idea of somehow that it's mine and accumulated. If you store too much fruit, it just goes off.
Yeah.
You know? So you end up giving it away. And I think it promotes a generosity of spirit as well, which I think is really lovely about just that, these moments of abundance when I've got so much here, have some.
Yeah. Yeah, and that links into the serving, because I picked that up when Barbara, you were saying about your daughter giving away, pumpkins, and it's an act of service in a way too, isn't it? A way we can serve others by sharing what we have, with those around us.
And we often find at church that, sorry, I've come in late because I had something else on.
Hello, Jeanette.
Hello. I was there right at the beginning, but then I had to go to something else. Sorry. And we often find at church people will bring if they have an abundance of something, they'll bring it to share with whoever might be there. But also we have two Papua New Guinea girls living in the Marupna Manse at the moment, and they have as soon as they moved in, they put in a vegetable garden, because where they came from, it was essential that you grew your own vegetables. And so the garden there at the moment is pretty much totally vegetable garden. And I was there today, and she was offering me kale. She said, "We've got plenty. You know, if you want some, please take some." And so yeah, it's been great to see them really self-sufficient, because they had very little money when they arrived. They really were refugees when they arrived, and they've grown a lot of their own just because they needed to. Yeah.
Yeah.
And had the time to, because they've each got a child. There's 2 girls and they've each got a child. One had a new baby and one had a 3-year-old, and yeah, they've worked in this garden. It's been good.
Mm. And that's a nice connection for them, you know, come from a different country, but bringing a part of, you know, their tradition with them, I guess, their way of connecting to their family, even though their family is so far away from them. Right. Through the garden, that's that real memories coming to life of family a long way away.
Yeah.
And they may well be growing some of their native plants.
Yes,
like
yes.
the
a lot of leafy green.
They grow African plants.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just go on. Oh, hang on, Brian, what about that? Okay, so the last part is connect, grow and serve, the last little segment. And where have we put the video for that one? I might have to.
Last one, keep going. That's it.
Oh, yeah. So, sorry, back up. Yeah. Yep, this is just a short video.
And we've come back inside from those other videos outside, and we've just taken the frittata out of the oven. Homegrown roast pumpkin, some cheese and some freshly picked herb to go with our lettuce, and we do have a couple of the last of our homegrown tomatoes that we'll add to that for lunch. These are some of the golden delicious apples that were picked earlier. They've been stewed up in a pot on the stove, then they've been put into the glass preserving jars, and then in the fowler's unit for an hour where they've been sealed, and they'll be good to go now. They'll keep, and in the middle of winter on a cold night we'll have some warmed stewed apple for dessert. Another thing we like to grow in the garden is these onions. These are probably an older variety of onion. They're called a tree onion, and this is the bulb part of the onion here. These were from my mother, and before that her father grew them, and possibly a generation before that. The tops here from the onion, when we harvest the onions, we have them in a row, we dig them up, Scott ties them in string and hangs them in the woodshed, and then we just come out and pick the small bulb part to use when we need an onion. These are called the tops, and these are kept, and then in about August, September, Scott will take this part and plant it in the garden, and that then grows into the next clump of bulbs, and the cycle continues.
So one thing we like to do is to sort of reduce our waste, reuse, recycle. One way we find very effective to reduce the waste in our rubbish bin is to utilise the school's soft plastic recycling they have down there in orange lidded bins, and all our clean soft plastics go into a plastic bag of some description and go down there to be recycled into other plastic materials, so that really reduces the amount of rubbish we have in our bin each week.
If you can scrunch it up, then it's soft plastic and it goes in the bag. Just scrunch it up, yep, goes in the bag. Scrunches in the bag. Scrunches goes in the bag. Yeah, scrunches.
Okay, so kids, what happens at your school when the orange lidded soft plastic bin is full?
The
what happens?
council comes and picks it up, and then they take it back and process it and make it into seeds. Like we have a seed at school made of all the soft plastic we gave the school in the bins.
It's not a very hard process, just takes just a little bit of time to do, worthwhile.
benefits are huge because
Take a look at the lilies and how they grow. They don't work to dress themselves. So why do you worry if God dresses plants so beautifully? How much better will He dress you and give you what you need? Luke 12:27-28. How does God dress the flowers? What is your favourite flower colour? What do flowers make you think of? What does this verse tell us about God's card? The wind is always there. Sometimes I see it in the clouds. Other times in the leaves and the trees. Sometimes it's soft and gentle, moving through my hair. Other times it's strong and bold as a mighty wave. It reminds me of the Holy Spirit leading and guiding me in God's direction.
why have we chosen our way of living? Our family believes God is creator of the world and that we are here to care for it. We want future generations to enjoy this earth, and we believe it starts with the simple choices that we make. Choices to cut down packaging, to recycle soft plastic, to repurpose older items, etc. This is also why we try to involve our children in all we do. We want to model to our children care for God's created earth, and that which was handed down to us to preserve is handed down to them to also
Cut off. Yeah. So that's sort of the last video segment, and there was probably just where am I going? A couple of slides to finish off with, but I think some of it we've already touched on, the fact that there's always opportunity to draw parallels to our life and the Christian faith. And just from a kid's point of view, we do try and find time to use the garden and plants as a basis for prayer or inspiration. The little card Harry read from you is out of a set we have called Mini Moments with God, and it's a tiny little set of cards, but it's quite nice, very kid friendly, and once a day we try and pick a card out of the box and read them, and sometimes they fit quite well with the garden and we can go outside there and read it and share them. Other times we would just read it after tea, but we like the questions. There's always 2 or 3 questions, and I think as adults and as parents, we sometimes don't put aside questions because we think, we don't have the answers, when we don't actually have to have the answers. We need to just ask the questions because children are very quick to find answers themselves. We know how their little brains work, making links with what they have in their head to new experiences and new learning. So we've just got to take that step of faith and be prepared to ask the questions and leave the rest to happen sometimes. There are many ways that each of you show love and care for God's creation, and if we had more time, we probably could have finished off with just sharing some of the things you do well, but we probably have to leave it there, Brian. I've probably talked too long and too much, and my videos might have been a bit long, but never mind. Don't know, lost it altogether. Yeah.
Still there.
Still here. Not sure where the screen went to. Yeah. So that was it. I think I did have one last slide, but it might have got cut off, Brian, so I'll just read it off my notes. And that was basically, thank you all for coming to share this session with us. May you be blessed in the tiny and simple steps you take each day to care for God's earth. May you find space to rest from the toil of life and feel time in the garden lifting you, sustaining you, nurturing you, and speaking to your spirit. God bless you all this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks, Heather. That was good.
Thanks very much,
Thank
Heather.
you.
Good, Heather. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We've got a session tomorrow afternoon looking at seasons of creation. We've got a Monday directed at people leading worship and looking ahead to how we can combine that in some of our services. And on Saturday, we finish off with Dr. Deborah Guess, who's going to be giving us our final keynote address. So hope to see you at one or more of those. And yeah, good night.
What time is it tomorrow, please, Brian?
2 o'clock. 2 o'clock.
Thank you.
Brian, a question
Yes.
about Saturday. When I registered, there didn't seem to be anything said about the coming Saturday in the